Welcome to another episode of Kera Dangerous Talk. Guys, I got to hit you with some news today about Colin Kaepernick. And to do that, I brought over my homie, NFL, USA Today, NFL columnist, Jarrett Bell. How are you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, Kara? It's good to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see your face as well.
Yeah. We go back to days in Bristol, Connecticut with ESPN. And here we are on a whole another platform. So good to
That's
see.
right.
Yeah,
My
good
own
to
platform. It feels even better, even nicer. How about that?
I know that's right.
Look, I had to bring in the big guns today because, Colin Kaepernick, his fans have been waiting for this time to happen where we're kind of hearing he may be getting a chance to get back in the NFL. But like I said, I want to bring on a big gun to really break it down for us today. So we're going to get into it, Jared. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about Colin Kaepernick for sure.
Okay, but before we do that, you know what I got to do? I got to hit them with the intro so they'll know where we at. So here we go. Ooh, you know what? Ooh, you know what? Ooh, you know what? Yes, and we're back. You didn't know I had that bop, did you?
I know. I remember, and it was like you could have let that play on for a couple more minutes. That was hot. That was hot.
I appreciate it. Look, we got serious news to talk about. Look
Okay.
now, Colin Kaepernick, he hasn't played in the NFL since what was it? 2017? Was that it?
Yeah,
2000.
I was sitting here before we came on the show trying to remember the exact date. 2017 sounds about right. 2018, everything hit the fan after, well, during and after. It's a shame that we're sitting up here talking about this. It's 2022.
Yes, it is. So actually, he was unsigned by NFL teams since 2017 after protesting police brutality against black people and other social injustices by kneeling during the national anthem. So we hear news that the Raiders are thinking about, maybe he could be a good fit for them. But I want to know from you how true it is because if I go to the Huffington Post, they have an article here where the Las Vegas Raiders owner says he will welcome Colin Kaepernick with open arms, and that he knows that he sacrificed a lot to get a message across about police violence and equality and inclusion in America, and he stands by that. He also goes on to say that I believe in Colin Kaepernick, the Raiders owner Mark Davis. He deserves every chance in the world to become a quarterback. Okay, I'm gonna say something, Jared. My mom
You
always
go
told,
first.
look, look, my mama always said you can make your mouth say anything, right? But
She
what
said
about
that.
the actions? How real is this? Can we really believe that is Mark Davis gonna make a move? What's going on?
Yeah. Okay. Now let's read between the lines and see exactly what this man said. He
Yes.
said he would welcome him with open arms to join the Raiders. Okay. How many years later? Okay. Now, let's also keep in mind that Derek Carr, the
Mm-hmm.
Raiders quarterback, who had a phenomenal season last year,
Mm-hmm.
even with the changeover with John Gruden and all of the drama, um, Carr took his game to another level and maybe could have been in the conversation for MVP. It was that good of a year for him. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say all that. They gave him a new contract. So they have their quarterback, okay, in terms of who they're investing their money in. Now, Mark Davis says, okay, somebody definitely asked him the question, and he responded by saying, oh, yeah, I would welcome him with open arms. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the way I read that is him saying, well, if my football people want him and they come to me and they say, we want to sign Colin Kaepernick, be it for a backup role, be it for an emergency, if something
Mm-hmm.
were to happen to Carr, that he says that they would get his stamp of approval. That's kind of how I read this. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing, you go back to this whole history with Colin Kaepernick, and as sad as it is, let me just say
Yes.
one thing first before I get into the football part. The whole idea of what he was protesting for, look at
Mm-hmm.
what happened in the years after Colin Kaepernick in his NFL situation. We had Mr. Floyd, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we had, any number of other cases of police brutality. So everything that Colin Kaepernick brought to the American consciousness on a football field, it really rang true not too long after that. And then remember, Roger Goodell comes out and says, we should have listened to our players more and all that crap, right? So more power to Colin Kaepernick for what he did when he did it. And he knew at the time that there was a possibility that he was sacrificing his career. And what a shame it is to be living in America and you have a situation where you say, well, if I speak my mind, I could be sacrificing my career. Same thing was said recently about Brian Flores when he signed that, he filed that lawsuit against the Dolphins and a couple of other NFL teams and the league, alleging violations of the Rooney Rule, discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. And the thinking was when Flores filed his lawsuit was that, he'll never get another job in the NFL. He has just committed career suicide. And it's a shame that people put it in that context, right? And let me just say, I thought that was a possibility too. Kudos to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin for hiring Brian Flores to at least give him a place in the NFL, even though he's overqualified to be linebackers coach. Maybe he'll still be able to be a head coach again. So all that said, the reasons for Colin Kaepernick not being in the league, we know what they are. And if Mark Davis really felt this strongly about Colin Kaepernick, maybe the Raiders would have made a move before in terms of bringing him in, even if it's as a backup, even if it's, you got Carr and not taking anything away from him. But, if you're Colin Kaepernick, obviously you want a chance to compete and show that you are a quarterback. I read in that quote, it's like Mark Davis says, well, he deserves every chance to be a quarterback. Well, he already is a quarterback. He's a quarterback without a job, okay?
Show me the money.
Yeah. So here's my bottom line on this, Kara. It's great to see Mark Davis say that, go on record to say that, because I think even shortly after Colin Kaepernick hit the free agent market and he first started looking for a job, there was a possibility he was going to sign with the Baltimore Ravens, right? And that would have been a great system for him. He played for John Harbaugh, the Ravens coach. They ended up signing RG3 at that time to come in, and that was before Lamar Jackson really, caught fire and became the guy that he was. But there was talk about the Ravens, and it seemed to be pretty close. And then that deal fell apart. And there are several reasons why it didn't happen, including the fact that Ravens ownership, as far as I've heard, was very concerned. And other owners maybe not have come out publicly, and the Ravens didn't come out and say that publicly either. But there was just concern in terms of, well, how is the fan base going to react to Colin Kaepernick, and would it turn off our sponsors and our season ticket holders? So all of those things were there, way back. I don't know if those things will go away. They should, because of what we've seen happen in America since then. They should have never been there in the first place. But bottom line, if I'm a Colin Kaepernick fan, I wouldn't hold my breath on this, just because we've heard different things percolate from time to time during these past few years. Remember the Seattle Seahawks, and the Seahawks, by the way, they kind of need a quarterback, right? With Russell Wilson gone. Right. There's been, a lot of discussion about whether they will trade for Baker Mayfield. I think that's a possibility. But the Seahawks definitely in the market for a quarterback. And Pete Carroll has has been on record a couple of times saying, oh yeah, Colin Kaepernick is a guy we have interest in. And Pete Carroll even said it recently. He said they didn't sign him before because they had Russell Wilson and they didn't think it was fair to bring him in that position. Well, guess what? You don't have Russell Wilson. You got Geno Smith, but you don't have Russell Wilson. And if you're going to really be serious about looking at Colin Kaepernick and giving him a chance, now would be a time for Seattle. So the Raiders, great. I think Seattle would be the team on the clock, on the hot seat right now, because we know they have a job. And, oh, by the way, the Carolina Panthers, I mean, what do they have at quarterback? I mean, you could say that about at least a half dozen teams where he should be able to walk in right now and at least compete. The Giants, okay? Really, Colin Kaepernick couldn't go there and beat out Daniel Jones, who they did not exercise the fifth-year option on. I don't think John Mara would be the guy like Mark Davis saying, I'd welcome him with open arms. In fact, I really seriously doubt John Mara would say that. So there are other situations that would be more realistic for Colin Kaepernick if you were a team really serious about giving him a chance.
You said Geno Smith, and that's a throwback for me. Like, I haven't heard that name in a while.
He's been backing up Russell Wilson, you know, and when Russell Wilson got hurt last year, Geno had to play, and he played pretty well. I mean, the team didn't do well, and the Seahawks didn't make the playoffs, but for 3 or 4 games, you know, Geno Smith, you know, he showed himself well. And like you said, that's a throwback because he's been on the bench behind Russell Wilson, but, you know, every team's got to have a backup guy. And then when they had to, you know, call that number, he was ready.
That's great.
But, and he may get a shot. You know, Pete Carroll has said it this offseason that Geno Smith will be in the competition. So we'll see. We'll see if they, like I say, trade for Baker Mayfield or something, or maybe even bring in Colin Kaepernick and see if Geno Smith can compete with all of that.
Well, let me ask you this, Jarrett, because there are 32 NFL teams, but there are a lot of players. Any rumblings about how players feel about if Kaepernick comes back on the field?
I have not heard that, except if you go back to 2017-18, and I mean, there was a lot of solidarity with players. It kind of came in trickles. Number one, you know, Eric Reed, his teammate, was, you know, his ride or die guy. Okay. But around the league, you had other players who protested for good reason. Then you had some teams that said, if anybody protests here, Dallas Cowboys, then you're not going to have a job, right? And lo and behold, there were a couple guys that called Jerry Jones's bluff, and they weren't there very long, okay? And, you know, the Cowboys said, oh, it was because they were underperforming, overweight, blah, 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 but weren't there. Anyway, bottom line, I still think that there is a mentality among players to look out for number one. And in a sense, you can't blame them when you think about what it takes to get to the point that you can play in the NFL, and NFL stands for not for long, right? It also stands for not for Colin Kaepernick, but I don't know if those letters match up, but point being, great point. I think there was the movement among players after the Kaepernick situation blew up, aided by Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually helped fortify some of the thinking among NFL players to the point where they really were able to have some dialogue with some teams and team owners in the league in terms of trying to do things to advance their cause. But in terms of would we, you know, go out on a limb, walk the plank for Colin Kaepernick, I didn't sense that at that time, and I don't sense that at this time, because you think about how many players are in the league now who were there when Colin Kaepernick took a knee. You know, 5 years in the NFL, Kera, is a long time. And just to throw a number out, an educated guess, I would think definitely no more than 50% of the players are still in the league that were in the league when Colin Kaepernick was taking his knee. And it might be something like 30% or 40%, because you have that turnover in the NFL just by the nature of the league and the roster and the salary cap. You know, you get, you know, the average career length is 3 years. And when you talk about, you take out all the guys who are 10-year veterans, that average is like a year, because the bottom of the roster turns over all the time from year to year in the NFL, because they're trying to, you know, manage the salary cap and that sort of thing. So I would say, you know, fewer than half of the players in the league now were in the league when Colin Kaepernick took his knee. So I don't know if they are invested to that degree.
Okay, I'm going to play a video, and then I'm going to come back and have a question. To Michigan by Jim Harbaugh. Now, Colin was quoted saying recently, for the past 5 years, I've been working out and staying ready in case an opportunity to play presents itself. Now, I've been hearing from other people in media when I watch their programs that if this didn't happen, like you kind of said earlier, when the whole George Floyd thing was going on, it's probably not going to happen now. In fact, on NBC Sports, Mike Golick actually said nobody thinks the juice is worth the squeeze, which which is so. I mean, you obviously we see that Jim Harbaugh still has belief in him, but when you hear things like that,
It's disappointing. It really is, because we're talking about a league where winning is supposed to be worth the bottom line, at least the competition on the field. We know that is not always true. The NFL is not always a meritocracy as people would like it to be, or like it to be perceived. That's a great analogy by Golick, and the
right.
squeeze and the juice. And without even knocking Colin Kaepernick, I mean, that was his opinion of kind of what's going on. But yeah, the point being that Colin Kaepernick looks as good today as he did, 4 years ago. That arm looked good, the hair looked great, the movement looked good. And so if any of these 32 teams wanted to see that before now, they could have easily done that and arranged to see him. So yeah, that's where the pessimism comes in. And remember, he had a settlement with the NFL in with his collusion case.
Yes,
I
he
don't
did.
know exactly how much money he got. There have been some numbers out there, but I also know that whatever that number is, it's supposed to be bound by a confidentiality clause. So I don't know exactly how much Colin Kaepernick received in that suit, but whatever he received, it came from 32 teams. It didn't come from just one team. It came from 32 teams, and everybody pitched in to pay off Colin Kaepernick. So the thinking now being that it would not surprise me if certain teams said, well, we've already paid off Colin Kaepernick. We don't want to touch him. So I think even from that standpoint, it makes it seem even more challenging to think that he'd get a shot. But I think the bottom line is that so many teams have needed quarterbacks since Colin Kaepernick took his knee. So there have been so many opportunities there. There are 5, 6, 7 teams out there right now who could use Colin Kaepernick, New York Giants. And so everything about this situation just looks like it's a lot of hope and hype. And, as you said a few minutes ago, show me the money. Yeah, show me a contract. Show me at least a guy getting into training camp to get a shot.
Now, I want to just let everybody know, here are some facts. During his final NFL season, Kaepernick tallied 16 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions in 12 total appearances. Now, Jared, I just want to ask you, because it doesn't seem like anybody's worried about this. We hear distraction, 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 okay? But is the NFL at all concerned that they'll be on the wrong side of history? It may not happen today, but later down the line, look at how the media portrayed Muhammad Ali. Okay,
Yeah.
they didn't like him at first, and then years later, centuries later, now they see him as a hero. I mean, they soften his image, but you get my point.
Totally.
Do you think this should be a concern for the NFL?
It should be a concern, but I don't know if it is. Hey, Kara, that was like, I think, my second or third Colin Kaepernick column back then. I said, this is some history right before our eyes. And regardless of what you think about Colin Kaepernick right now, years from now, people will view him in a different light. And I think that has proven to be true. Even though when you say, well, what people? Well, there's a lot of people, especially younger people, especially, definitely people of color and people who are more liberal in their thinking. I think they see the value in what Colin Kaepernick did in terms of the stand he took. And so, yeah, that is an American story, okay? Any way you want to slice it. So, yeah, I think years from now that the NFL will look like, it was wrong in how it handled Colin Kaepernick. But to the people now that are in control in the league, and the power brokers in the league, the people who are concerned with the image. I don't think that they are worried about, well, in 2075, this is how this is going to look. I think they're trying to get through the day and through the week and through the season. And so, in terms of Colin Kaepernick's place in history, I think it is already secure. And to compare him to Ali, I think is fair just because of what he sacrificed and knew he was sacrificing just to make his point, and then to see everything that happened in a short time after he took a knee, as it's sad to say that it was a forewarning of some tragedies that happened.
Well, let me ask you this, because normally when somebody comes into the league and they say, well, I'm going to work my hardest, and even if I have to start back up, I want to be the main guy. I want to be the starter. Normally that's looked at as, oh, okay, great. But when you've been through what Colin Kaepernick has been through, and you make that statement and you say, I don't mind starting as backup, but I want to be a starter at some point. I'm hearing some people say, wait a minute, some teams may not like that because, for instance, Tim Tebow, he wanted to be a starter, but they just didn't see him that way. They wanted to move his position. So they felt like if, a person like that who has those type of kind of crazy fans, if they don't do kind of what they want, then that's going to become a thing.
Yeah, I think it really takes a strong team, strong leadership, strong coach, strong locker room to handle Colin Kaepernick if a team signed him. But there are teams out there that are like that have those things. They have a strong owner that has principles. They have, a strong head coach. But none of these teams have stepped up and signed Colin Kaepernick. But in terms of the whole distraction thing, but how, if Michael Vick can come back and get a job in the NFL after all the drama and, all of the bad publicity that, was generated from, for him regarding the dogfighting situation, he got another chance. Okay. And, I think when Michael Vick came back, he came back to Philadelphia. Andy Reid brought him back. PETA protested. There were protests maybe, at some of the games, or maybe there was even somebody at every game, but, it was noticeable those first couple of games. And then, it kind of got to be a point of, okay, is Michael Vick going to win the starting job, right? And can he get his game back and all of that? So I think that Colin Kaepernick deserves at least that. But again, what I think he deserves and what NFL people think he deserves, two different things. But as far as the distraction, maybe it's a distraction, when he walks in, because everybody's going to revisit the story and so on and so forth. But again, to that point, when you start talking about public perception, the difference now versus the difference when he took a knee is what happened with George Floyd and others in this society that, really kind of, illustrated, all the horrible things that Colin Kaepernick wanted to bring some attention to.
And how about this, NFL? How about if you want to let him back in, how about you just stand behind him? I think if they stood behind him and stopped using this, I think the distraction thing, I kind of get it, but then I feel like it's an excuse. It's like you just say distraction and that'll keep people quiet. It's a distraction.
Yeah, I think for the most part, and again, that collusion lawsuit, don't know what the numbers were, but remember 32 teams chipped in to pay off Colin Kaepernick, right?
In 2019, they
settled. Exactly. Right. And they settled it. So after you settle, are you inclined to say, oh, I want this guy? I don't know if that's realistic to think that people would think that way. But even beyond that, you said the NFL should just let them back in. Okay. Remember, the NFL is 32 teams. So maybe Mark Davis says that he would welcome him with open arms. Would Jerry Jones welcome him with open arms? Would Stan Kroenke, who has a quarterback, by the way, welcome him with open arms? Would Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick welcome him with open arms? They gave Cam Newton a shot. Would David Tepper, the Carolina Panthers owner, Woody Johnson, the Giants owner, on and on. John Mara, the Giants, I said Woody Johnson, Jets owner, John Mara, Giants owner. I mean,
it sounds like you rapping over there.
but that's my whole point. You can say the NFL could put out a video and say, yeah, we welcome Colin Kaepernick back, right? And we've moved on, and we think society should move on. Look at what we put in our end zone, in racism. We all must work together. It's right there on the field, stenciled in the end zone. Okay, but still, it takes the individuals who have the power to sign them, and it really just takes one at this point. And like I said, Pete Carroll has talked a good game about Colin Kaepernick a couple of times, but here he is right now, needing a quarterback to succeed Russell Wilson. And to my knowledge, they haven't made a move.
Yeah, I hate to tell anybody to give up, but for me, it's just like, you have the hard stance on the NFL. We all know doing his Netflix special, Calling White and Black, I believe is titled. He compared the NFL combine to slavery, and I understand some of those statements, but it's just like, at what point do you just don't even want to be involved with the NFL anymore? And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve it because he worked his whole life for it, but I just wonder, does he have that conversation also? And my last question to you, Jarrett, this season and him trying to get on teams, is this the last chance? Does this feel like after this, it just needs, it's done?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. And the reason why I say that is because I thought the last time was going to be it. And I thought a couple of times before that was going to be it. But yeah, what is different this time around? He had the real showcase at the University of Michigan and looked good. And now you get, a little more buzz out there with people talking about it. So I wouldn't say it's the last time, because what happens if we get to, September 15th and some team's quarterback, suffers an injury in the second week of the season or something, right? And you start looking and say, okay, who can we get? Do we want to call Phillip Rivers at 40 years old and get him off the couch? Or do we want to call Colin Kaepernick and see if he wants to do it? I mean, I think that possibility is always there. Now, Colin Kaepernick or Phillip Rivers or anybody, Robert Griffin III, anybody who's a Cam Newton, anybody who's out of football right now would have to ask themselves, okay, do I want to go in week 2 and try to learn the playbook and, really try to build from there? Or am I at such a disadvantage that it's going to be a losing situation for me to try to come in there and play catch up? I don't know that. But if you are looking for a job, you probably should take it either way, right? Just because it might be a rare opportunity. So I wouldn't say that this would be the last time, except, and one of the reasons is because so many people are still supporting Colin Kaepernick, at least the fans are, right? And people want to see this for him. So I think the conversation will always be there. Now, whether or not that means that he's on the NFL's radar, I'm not going to say that, because I swear, I don't know the circumstances of why Mark Davis said what he said, but I would bet my bottom dollar somebody asked him the question to say, okay, what would you think about Colin Kaepernick? And he responded the way he did.
Well, thankfully, we have other quarterbacks like Tom Brady still playing, because you look at Colin and you say he's 32 years old. On NFL, you take a lot of hits. I mean, the quarterback, sometimes they take hits, sometimes they don't. But, we'll see how long this goes on. And
yeah, but you're right. Colin Kaepernick has what they call fresh legs, right?
Right. He's been sitting out.
He hadn't been hit. So you can't use that excuse that he's all battered and beaten up right now.
Absolutely. Now, I know you've covered him in the past. I just want to let everybody know, when you write for USA Today, you're a columnist. You spoke. So that's why I wanted to have you on today as well. Can you tell everybody where they can check out more of your columns and everything?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Kera. USAtoday.com. That's our, tried and true website. So please go there, check it out. I'm on Twitter at Jarrett Bell, and I'll post stories there. In fact, also on Twitter, you can follow at USA Today Sports, and they post all of our columns, and include mine, Mike Jones, my colleague at USA Today on the NFL desk, Mike Freeman, who does a wonderful job writing columns about race and culture. You can find him, I think, at Mike Freeman NFL on Twitter, and by Mike Jones is another one of my colleagues. So again, I put a plug in for those guys too, because they cover this just like I do. But yeah, we're out there, and we'll definitely keep up with Colin Kaepernick if there's something to be said. But I want a different story with Colin Kaepernick. I want the story about, okay, here's the chance he was looking for, and here's training camp starting next week. So
I know, and then after he gets the chance, then we have to be nervous, like, oh God, please play well, so you can show these people out, you know.
True to a sense, but even beyond that, you know, from my standpoint, it's just give him the chance, because I don't think he's going to stink it up. But I know what you're saying. After all of this, he's got to go in and show well. But then, you know, the other question will be, well, okay, he's got to knock some rust off, all of that. But at this point, let's just get this man on a team. And hopefully, if it happens, this would be the ideal time after the draft. So you've had free agency, you've had the draft. People have drafted their young quarterbacks. Some people we thought may have made a move on a quarterback didn't. So now you kind of reboot. I'm talking about each individual team. You see where your holes are. There's still some free agents out there. There's another wave of free agency. But if you're talking about Colin Kaepernick, seriously, Seattle Seahawks, now would be the time, because you've got a couple, 3 months before training camp. So give them the playbook, let them learn the playbook. You got the OTAs, the mini camp. So if you're really seriously thinking about Colin Kaepernick, now is the window of opportunity so that he could have a chance to legitimately compete in training camp in the preseason and the regular season if it gets to that point.
Yes, NFL columnist, USA Today, Jarrett Bell, you came through and you broke it down. I want to remind all the viewers to make sure you like this video, leave us some awesome comments, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Kera Dangerous Talk YouTube channel. Jarrett, it was lovely. Thank you so much for your analysis on every single thing today.
All right. Thank you, my sister. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, and we're out.